You know, we're so disconnected from life. You know, our culture has so much to answer for because it's severed us. It's like, you know, I've been really thinking, because I'm pregnant, like why have I become pregnant just immediately before this roadshow? And a couple of things have been coming to me, and one of them is that our civilization, our species, our planet, or the life on this planet is at a time period that we can either choose to abort life or we can birth a new life.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and I'm in California. My guest has come all the way from Australia. I'm with Kelly Tudhope, who, thank you for coming.
You're welcome.
All this way.
Thanks for inviting me.
You're with the Rainforest Information Center.
That's right.
And you're on a roadshow. Tell us about it.
So I left Australia. Well, I started in northern Queensland in Australia at the end of July, and went to New Zealand after that for a couple of days, and then flew over to Vancouver, BC, and from there my friend and I, Pat Rusmussen, have been on the road and doing a series of presentations called Climate Change, Despair and Empowerment Roadshow.
Climate Change, Despair and Empowerment Roadshow.
That's right.
Whoa! All right, tell us about that. What are you doing?
Well, we're trying to get people to recognise how they can, and teach people how they can move through their despair and into a position of empowerment and action on this very important issue.
That's a big task.
It is a big task. First, you've got to recognise that people have to recognise that they are even in this sort of space, and then have the willingness and the courage to move through it.
So if somebody comes to your roadshow event, it's a presentation?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a little flavour as if we were there in short?
Okay, so we're introduced with a segment from Ross Galpspan, and we're talking about what ExxonMobil and other oil companies have been doing as Ross Galpspan has exposed, and it's been in the media, you know.
Ross Galpspan wrote a book called Boiling Point.
That's correct, yeah.
And, I mean, he's a journalist, and my memory is that he does very good science, very solid.
For sure.
So what you're saying is that ExxonMobil and other oil companies have been paying scientists and others to poo-poo that climate change is happening?
Yeah, make it appear,
discredit it.
Yeah, make it appear that it's not happening, or if it is, then they've been using delaying tactics to stop people acting on the issue. And so, you know, there's been some reporting this year in Australia on that issue, and even the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report was some scientists were approached by such companies and offered money to discredit that report.
So this is the Intergovernmental Climate Change Panel, IPCC actually, came out with a very important, their third or fourth report in February, which is the one that said it's like 90% certain that human activity is causing this global climate change, which is, of course, not what the oil companies are going to want to hear.
No,
because it means we're doing it ourselves.
I know, and that means we've got to change, and you know the balance of power is therefore threatened, which you know, it's the last thing they want.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
So you start with Ross.
Yeah.
Do you show some of his conversation, or just quote him? Or?
Yeah, no, we have a segment from Ross Galpspan interview of the same name, Boiling Point, and just to let people know how severe the problem is, and sort of such widespread changes that we need to undertake across the board, and just get people into the feeling of that.
There's an urgency.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, just this week, just before you arrived here, word came that a chunk of the Arctic ice sheet has melted the size of the UK. The whole of Ireland, England, Scotland. I mean, that big a chunk.
Yeah.
And what the scientists are saying is it is happening much more quickly than even their worst case scenarios.
Oh, is that right?
So the news keeps coming.
So what we learn in the Despair and Empowerment Roadshow is, firstly, that emotions like despair are really justified in our situation, because, you know, Al Gore's been quoted as saying that despair is completely unjustified in light of the situation. We just got to put that aside and act, you know. But when we hear things like that, how can you not feel despair? In my mind and my heart, despair is the most justified sort of response. You know, we are human, we are part of this earth, and we need to feel this, you know, the urgency and that we need to act, and how significant and widespread the problem is.
So what you're saying, I think, is that despair is a natural thing for us to feel. I mean, certainly when confronted with this information, I'm sure that most of us in some form or other feel the magnitude of this is too big, what all we have to change, I can't even imagine.
That's right.
It's hopeless.
That's right.
It's too big. And so when Al Gore says not to despair, I noted that John Seed, who started the Rainforest Information Center, said about that just because we know these facts doesn't mean that we're going to act on it.
That's right. That's right.
And that's worthy of despair if we're not going to act on it.
That's right. And what we see, well, what I've seen, you know, around in Australia and in America, where I've been for the last few weeks, is that just because we even feel these emotions, or if we allow ourselves to feel these emotions, doesn't mean we're going to take the steps that need to be taken. We can't. We look at our governments and they're not doing very much at all, and so this in itself further justifies our despair on top of the, you know, the information that we get on climate change and the severity of it.
That's true. I mean, the Australian government and the American government are two the big holdouts here in terms of reducing emissions and so on. So it's sensible for us as citizens to be despairing because our government, you know, do something, and they're not.
But you know, our despair goes past this. You can look at despair as a natural reaction to the truth of how we feel and the suffering that we feel on all the planet. So, you know, Joanna Macy, who's written works on despair and empowerment, and John Seed's helped develop, would say that the reason that we feel this despair is because in truth, underneath it, we feel a compassion and an interconnectedness with all forms of life, and it is an expression of that. And so this is why we have these feelings.
Because we know we're connected with all of life, and we care that life continue.
That's right. Yeah.
Even though we humans are jeopardizing that.
Yeah.
That's so. How do you help people
move through
get down into the layer under the despair that sort of, I think for many people, probably just sort of stops at paralysis or denial or whatever? How do you...
And so I guess the first step is to actually recognise that the belief that despair is like a quagmire or dead end in the road is a cultural conditioning. And we have been taught this by our society, that despair, when we hit it, that there's no way out, and oh well, let's just give up. But you know, we can see despair another way. We can choose to see it another way, in a way that is a lot more truthful. And that is more like despair as a signpost on the road of life as opposed to a final destination. You know, so many different worldviews teach that if we have the courage to sit within an emotion and just to feel it, then we can move through it, and in doing so we can transform that emotion into the empowerment and the passion that we need to act on the issue. And so what we talk about in the Roadshow is how all we really need to do is to have the courage to sit down with people and to share our feelings on the state of the environment, and in doing so we pull the cork out of the bottle, and all these pent-up emotions that are in this bottle can be released, and it is in their release that we find the passion and the motivation to act.
That notion of sitting and being, or expressing the despair we feel, the sadness, the grief, the anger, the frustration, whatever form it takes, to know that that's not the end, and that in expressing it safely with people who will hear, what you're doing is releasing the power to the caring that's under there, right? You know, I do want this life on the planet to continue. I do want my grandchildren to have a planet that they can be happy at. Yeah,
see, one of the other things we've been taught in our Western society is that the last thing we want to do is express these emotions, because in part our feeling function or our intuition or our instinct, you can call it any of these, has been sort of put on a lower pedestal to our logical or our intellectual capacity. And so what we need to do to we can think all we want, you know. In New Zealand and Australia, there's the phrase you think all you want till the cows come home, but it doesn't mean you're going to do anything about it, because what motivates you is your feelings and your passion to do something. The reason that people go out and look after children is because they care about children, or they look after animals because of how they feel. It's not the thought that I care or I want to do something that really motivates us. It's our heart that brings us into action.
That's a really good point, because there's a lot of intellectualizing that I see, a lot of information about climate change, about peak oil, about other energy resource decline, all kinds of things, extinctions, and we can talk forever. But you're right, it's when we feel that we're moved out of our thoughts and moved to move.
That's right.
Take action.
Yeah.
So you're inspiring people to be in touch with those feelings, to go through the paralysis. Yeah. Then what?
And then we talk about the type of things that we can do, because when you've got this, you know, all this passion to go and do something, then you go, the next logical question is, if we're thinking about what can we do about this situation. Yes. And so then we start looking at solutions. And in the Roadshow, we really distinguish between what we call as business as usual solutions as opposed to more real lifestyle changes.
Business as usual solutions, which you think of as sort of, that's not going to work. That's pretty much. Is that right?
I think that the business as usual solutions aren't actually a solution to the climate change at all. I think they are solutions to the industrial and political problem of how to keep business as usual, or the system running in face of a public that is increasingly concerned about climate change.
So can you give us some examples of what some business as usual solutions are?
Yeah, but before, like nuclear energy, biodiesel. That kind of thing.
Any of the biofuels, because you're using the land that we need for food, in part.
That's right. But the rationale behind both nuclear and carbon sequestration, or carbon capture and storage, as it's known as well.
To take the carbon from burning oil or coal and put it back in the ground.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so what all of these types of solutions have in common is that they allow us to continue with our life as we live it now. And so the rationale, if you like, behind changing the fuel in your car is that you can keep driving 2 tons of metal with you anywhere you go.
Yes.
And all you've got to do is put something other in the tank than fossil fuels. And so it means that we don't have to change. We just have to change the system.
There you go. It's sort of like from the supply side. Well, you'll swap your gasoline with ethanol, but you can still drive, as much as you want.
That's right. And so another thing that these so-called solutions have in common is that they are what is known as technocratic or technological solutions to the problem. And this is the sort of type of solutions that Western society has always favoured over other ones like lifestyle changes. Like it's we can think our way out of the solution. We don't have to change. We can just come up with a new idea and it will solve the problem.
Yeah. Well, we are enamored of technology in the West. Technology will save us. That's one of the standard answers here.
That's right. But one of the things that you learn through history is that with every technology there are ramifications. And with nuclear power, the ramifications from waste are so huge that we really have to consider whether or not it is justified in any circumstance.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Sure. The radioactive waste that has to be monitored for thousands of years, and we can't do that. Oh,
especially we may not even be able to remember to do that. How many generations down the track can we actually remember to monitor the waste?
So you're saying solutions that are business as usual, swapping out different energy forms, certainly nuclear because it has tremendous problems, biofuels. What else in the business as usual? I mean, a lot of people are moving towards solar or wind or tides, even though that's a very small percentage of, I'm sure those are the right direction. But it's still not going to give us all the energy, or will it give us all the energy that people are wanting to use?
I think that sort of question is, the definite answer is debatable at the moment, and the technology is still in development to somewhat and to some stages. But I think there's a potential for these different types of solutions to work together, like solar and wind and wave power, but we don't really know enough quite yet to know how the pieces fit together, and so we sort of don't want to jump the gun and choose solutions that are going to have widespread ramifications.
That's certainly true.
You know, it's happened in the case of biodiesel in Borneo because maybe you don't know, the palm oil plantations were put in, swamp forests were clear-felled in Borneo for the growth of palm oil plantations, and as a result, massive amounts of carbon dioxide was released into the atmosphere through burning
the rainforests.
Burning the rainforest, which caught peat soil on fire. And peat soil
soil has a lot of methane in it.
Contains 30 times the amount of carbon dioxide than do the trees above.
So what we've done is we burn down the rainforests in order to put up palm oil to make biofuels. And my understanding is that rainforests are some of the best places to keep carbon.
That's right.
So we are making it worse.
That's right. But we're releasing all of that stuff stored in the ancient carbon dioxide stored in the peat soil. And so it's my belief that we just need to slow down a bit, which leads us to one of the other solutions we can talk about.
Which I want to talk about. What's a real solution, a true, what do we need to do you think?
I think we actually need to change the way that we live our life. You know, we can't continue this, unprecedented growth. There are limits to growth, and, there's so many people talk about the limits to growth.
But our economy is based on unlimited growth.
Well, maybe that's a bit fallacious then, because it's certainly not true. I think we're at we need about 3 worlds worth of...
3 worlds worth of resources to keep
right.
growing at the rate we're going right now.
Yeah, and so upwards if we keep growing.
So
we need to really look at ourselves first and foremost. As individuals, we can start looking at ourselves and saying, how can I change? Because for any solution to be lasting, we need to realise that we need to change ourselves as well. We can't just keep saying it's out there. The problem is out there.
Yeah.
The problem is in us.
In the way we live.
That's right. So we need to change our lifestyles. And one of the simplest ways that we can save 1 billion barrels of oil a year in America is simply by lowering the speed limit.
Lowering the speed limit. 1 million barrels. My understanding
No, sorry, 1 billion.
1 billion barrels, which is about how much we are importing from the Middle East.
That's exactly the same.
Interesting.
Yeah,
so if we all just brought our speed limit down to what, 50?
55 from 75 on the freeways, you'd save
down
about
to 55.
that. Yeah.
We wouldn't need to be in Iraq.
No. That's how the argument goes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So one of the things is the speed limits. What other kinds of changes in behavior do you think that people can undertake?
I think one of the biggest ways that we can look at is our food choices.
Food?
Yes. Which, what I say in the presentation is I'm certainly not telling you what to eat because people don't like it when I do that. But so I just give them some advice, some information they can follow. And obviously Food Miles is looking at where your food is produced is a really important way to reduce carbon. And so you can look at, the average piece of food travels 1,600 miles from where it is produced to where it's consumed.
Yes.
And so we can support local agriculture. You not only build community, but you'll reduce your carbon emissions. And other things like growing your own food's fantastic, and supporting community co-ops and community gardens or city farms as ways that we can reduce our footprint.
I know that transportation of food is one of our major places where petroleum is used. So if we are getting our food, and of course California we're very fortunate because we've got good growing very close to us, but I imagine out in the middle of Nevada it's going to be a little tougher.
Well, I don't know, but I haven't been to Nevada. So.
It's a desert.
It's a desert. Hey, well
so it's
then,
be tougher, and
it will be
yet
tougher.
They can do it.
Yeah, of course, but they might actually have to consider organic and permaculture as ways to correct the soils. And,
yes.
This will be a bit of experimentation. It's certainly outside of my expertise, but there are quite a lot of reports around the world of places that are in desert that have really successfully started food production through use of permaculture and organic agriculture.
So really we're talking about a lifestyle here where people are aware of what they're doing with their energy use, in particular fossil fuels. Now, in California, that will be transportation, as you brought up, transportation of food. So we won't buy any of your Australian and New Zealand apples and lamb.
You could grow your own.
That's right. I mean, we've got them here in our own country.
Well,
right.
Perfect.
And beef and so on. We also, of course, are using natural gas is a major way that we're producing electricity in California. And even though we're moving towards a lot more solar, we're not there yet.
Yeah, yeah.
So even reducing our electricity is going to help.
Reducing electricity is going to help for sure. All of the types of like getting on your bike, carpooling, getting on a bus, all of these at the individual level will reduce your carbon footprint, and it's fantastic because it builds moral fibre and integrity, which we need in this day and age. But by itself, individual solutions will not solve the problem. We need a lot bigger solutions in this. And so one of the big and main solutions we talk about in the Roadshow is the importance of stopping clear felling forests or logging of forests.
Stopping forestry, logging.
Yeah,
so we've got our carbon still standing.
Yeah, of course, and that's what we want, and they sequester carbon. 25% of the world's carbon emissions are from the logging of forests.
Wow.
And so if we can stop this practice, then we're going to save biodiversity, which, given that life's made out of carbon, the more biodiversity, the better. But also it's going to allow for us to have this carbon resource, it's saved in the trees.
Right. So, okay, so stop logging, or only do thinning, if you will, but keep our forests intact.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you need to do thinning even.
Well, over time, you're right. The forest thins itself. It's quite capable of doing that.
That's right. So that's one of a big way. Okay. But obviously, things like the clear felling of forests and even lowering the speed limit aren't really things you can do at the individual level.
Right.
Of course, you can drive along at 55 miles an hour, but it can
be. Not until everybody's doing it, or mostly.
Yeah, I do it, but it can be dangerous, especially in Australia. We've got these big trucks and they drive right up your rear when you drive slow. It's about 87 kilometres or something in Australia. But so these types of solutions are ones that require a change in our policies and can only happen with a collective movement.
And so is that part of what you're doing, is helping people to organize in our last 5 or 6 minutes here, organize so that a collective from the bottom pushes our governments?
Yeah. One of the things that we say, well, this is exactly what we're doing, because we don't, at the Rainforest Information Centre, we don't actually believe that anything will work other than a massive grassroots movement. The solutions that we are talking about here are so profound and so different that we have to give government and even industrialists the mandate to do what we need to be done. They're not going to do it unless we make them do it. And so in order to do that, we need to build a grassroots movement.
So is that part of the Roadshow?
Yeah, for
really?
sure. Yeah, so the Roadshow's been on the road now since December, at different times.
So it's what, 8 months?
Yeah, and so we've been well over, probably around 150 presentations now between a few of us presenters. And so one of the goals of this is to establish groups, climate action groups in areas where they don't exist. And where they do exist, then we ask for people to join existing groups, and we get this happening. And the solutions need to be local. As much as it is a global problem, we need local solutions. And so we ask people to sign up and really start acting on the issue.
So you're not trying to sort of form the worldwide climate action network in a sense. It's just empowering in all the localities. And when the times are right or the events are right, like the Step It Up action that we all did last April, we can be we can bring all the voices together.
Yeah, for sure. So we'd like to get the groups networked eventually, but we're all volunteers, and so there's a limited sort of resources that we have in our hands, and so maybe one day we'll find someone that can do that job.
Yes.
And get these grassroots groups networked and to information share as well. So many groups have such fantastic ideas that we just want everybody to know about and share.
Yes.
So
it's an exciting thing, though. I mean, to watch that kind of grassroots effort, among ourselves. What it turns around is that despair becomes people empowered.
That's right. And so, first off, they might come to the presentation and be full of despair, and literally some people are talking at the end of the presentation about really how much in despair they are, and you get a whole room full of people that are just saying, I'm devastated and I don't know what to do, and what I want to act but I can't get over these feelings, and how do I do that? And then they come and they join these groups and they start acting, and then they realise, wow, once these emotions are liberated and I go and do something, then these sort of feelings subside.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, but sometimes they come back. Sometimes we find out the Arctic shelf is, or one of the Arctic shelves is just melted, and we go, oh no, and we go back there. But that's just sort of like a great opportunity to find even more empowerment. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing like we, have been conditioned to believe that such emotions are.
That's really where our power lies, and we've sort of numbed ourselves. The culture says, you don't want to go there, you don't want to be angry, you don't want to be sad, and so we're all holding it in.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think it's a nice thing to acknowledge that the despair can go, and it goes in cycles, it goes in waves, and I experience that. I get the latest news, and it's like, ugh. And then I'll move on. Yeah. Once I'm in touch with that.
But we need to know that we can move on. It's not the end of the world.
Yes.
Just because we have these feelings.
It's very heartening to me to have someone your age, someone younger, out doing this, because it's your future.
Oh, for sure.
And your world, and my generation, and those that are older have gotten to live at the peak. Yeah. Yeah. And we need to make sure that your lives aren't, and quality of life isn't jeopardized any more than it is.
Yeah, for sure. So that's
thank you for coming to do this.
That's all right. I don't mind. It's great. It's so inspiring.
Really?
People go, oh, how do you do this? It must be so despairing. You have all this knowledge. And I go, I'm totally inspired. I get to hear all these groups of people all around the world talking about what they're doing to bring about change. And, we're at an opportunity that no other time in humanity's our species' lifetime that I know about has had, and we have an opportunity to reshape our world and into the dream that we see in our hearts. So, be fantastic.
It's a good time to be alive. It's a challenging one. We are being asked to step up to the plate and become a mature species.
That's right.
That's thinking not just for our own selves, but for the whole of life on the planet.
That's right, and it is a challenge, but I believe we can do it.
Well, that's because you've moved through your despair, and you're empowered, and you're fed by watching other people.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing about empowerment is that you just keep getting empowered. It's not that I've found. It doesn't seem to stop. You just seem to get more and more empowered. But our empowerment's in ourselves. It's not in another person. We go to these presentations and people say, "Where do I find empowerment?" And it's in here. This is the only place it is. You can get inspired by other people and what they do, but the empowerment is in you. The power is always there, but you just have to recognise it and liberate it.
Thank you for coming along on the Roadshow and just reminding people and giving them a process where they can find that empowerment underneath their despair and action to take. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You're watching Peak Moment, Community Responses for a Changing Energy Future. I'm Janaea Donaldson. Join us next time.